name is Paul Bellringer, and I come from England in the United Kingdom, and I have been involved with responsible gambling issues for 32 years. I used to work in the probation service, and that's when I became interested in gambling. And after a while I founded a charity that dealt with young people in gambling, and then I founded GamCare, which is the large organisation in the UK that runs a helpline, provides counselling and education and harm prevention work. Currently, I just have two roles left, as I'm sort of retired, whatever that means. I sit on the National Responsible Gambling Strategy Board, and I also am a director of an organisation that adjudicates in disputes between a gambling operator and a gambler that they can't resolve themselves. The most important thing was the subject of my input to this conference in not to follow the example that's happened in the United Kingdom, because following our quite comprehensive and well thought through Gambling Act of 2005, they set up a tripartite structure with the strategy board setting national strategy on gambling, Responsible Gambling Fund to commission service providers to monitor and evaluate, and an organisation that collected the voluntary, and I emphasise voluntary, levy from the gambling industry. But unfortunately, the gambling industry has exercised its muscle and taken back the initiative and basically stopped the Responsible Gambling Fund operating independently, and now the industry are taking that over. So the tripartite structure in the UK has actually fallen apart, and we've taken several significant steps backwards. The issues in terms of gambling harm that need to be addressed. There is still a focus on machines in the United Kingdom, or in Great Britain should I say, but to my mind the bigger challenges are to do with internet gambling. Having said that, or remote forms of gambling now, it's not just the internet, of course we can all do it with handheld devices. And whilst I am an advocate, and I think that we were right to regulate and legalise remote forms of gambling, so that it wasn't driven underground, that way you can force operators to be responsible. Having said that, of course it throws up a huge number of challenges in terms of accessing gambling or opening gambling channels up to people who otherwise wouldn't go out to venues, different vulnerabilities. People can gamble in any state. They could be stuffed with drugs, they could be drunk, and they can still gamble, where you wouldn't be able to do that in a venue. So there's a lot of challenges around that. That we're facing in the UK, which is becoming a global issue. But interestingly, I think the issue that I've picked up from this conference that is particularly globally important is we all still suffer from a lack of hard evidence of effectiveness and the outcomes of treatment provision, of educational programs, or indeed the responsibility programs that the gambling industry are required to put in place. We still do not really know what works. Rather than the esoteric research that sometimes if it's university-led, it's what they want to do. What we need now is a focus on the real issues. What are we doing? I'm talking about New Zealand, Australia, United States, United Kingdom. We're all basically over, in my experience of the 30 years, we've all gone along the same path at roughly the same pace with the same issues coming up. But what we need now is to focus on hard data collection of what we've been doing and base our future policy on that. Because it's not fair to the gambling industry if we ask them to do something that's ineffective, and it's not fair to the problem gamblers or those at risk, more importantly, those at risk, if we're putting educational messages into the field that actually have no value. We do need that, and that seems to be a common theme from this conference, and is so important we now start focusing on that in particular. When I first got involved in gambling this 32 years ago, I became passionate about getting a balance right between allowing the legitimate industry to operate gambling activities, but it being done in a responsible fashion that minimized harm, and there was appropriate sources of help for not only those that get into difficulty, but the other people it affects as well. That was 32 years ago, and I am just as passionate today about those very self-same issues. You know, the public health agenda, the harm minimization, whether it be focused at the industry, whether it be focused at the community as a whole, whether it be focused at the regulator, or actually whether it's focused on government, as Nick Xenophon this morning was highlighting that the vacillations of government and the politics get in the way of us all having a coherent policy that allows gambling to take place. Because let's face it, most of us do it, but at the same time harm is minimized and there is help for those that fall victim to it. I would like to hope that this conference is different from the many I have experienced in my time in gambling. Unfortunately, when people go back to the coalface, the value of what they learnt at the conference is often lost. But one of the values that does get carried forward is the networking opportunities and the linkages that are made. And so particular issues, like as I say, the public health agenda, and there's the Public Health Alliance and things of that nature, that really is the core strand of what gets carried forward. But also the other value is that delegates from, or attendees from, a number of countries go home and they say, well, actually what's happening here is being mirrored in what happened in New Zealand or Australia or elsewhere, and that then forms alliances and linkages globally. And if we are seriously going to make progress to keep harm at a minimum and help those that are damaged by gambling, particularly with the fact we are now seeing an expansion of remote forms of gambling, our response has to be cohesive, coordinated and global.